Okay, so welcome again to everyone that's just joined the Aroha room for our third session with Kaila Colbin. I'm super excited to be the weaver in this room because I love Kaila's work. Kaila is the co-founder of BOMA Global and the CEO of BOMA New Zealand. She does a whole bunch of other things, including being the co-founder of the nonprofit Ministry of Awesome and the curator and licensee of TEDx Christchurch and also TEDx Scott Base in Antarctica. And she is now also a certified Dare to Lead facilitator based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown. So welcome, Kaila Colbin, over to you.
Tēnā koe Erica, tēnā koe Stephen, nā mihi kia koroa, nā mihi kia koutou, ko Kaila Colbin tōku ingoa. Hello everyone, it's a total pleasure to be here. I am in awe of what you have accomplished in terms of organizing this Unconference, and I mean, an Unconference is emergent and complex at the best of times, and to do one virtually the way you have, I bow to you both and to you all. So, nā mihi kia koutou. So the way we're going to run today, we have 25 minutes or so. It's not a lot of time. I'm going to talk for maybe 10 minutes. We're going to split out into breakout rooms for a bit, and then we're just going to come back and have a kind of group discussion. And I think, have you all used the raising hand functionality? You all have access to the raising hand functionality. If you click on the participants button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can use that raising hand functionality. And I've just been made a co-host, so I can acknowledge you and unmute you once you've raised your hand when we have a discussion after we return from the breakout rooms. So as Erica said, a little over a year ago, I had the immense privilege of traveling to Texas and spending 3 days training with Brené Brown. And Brené has a lot of super fans. There may be some on this call. Those super fans may be surprised to know there are plenty of people who haven't heard of her. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, Brené is she's kind of a celebrity academic. She is a research professor at the University of Houston, where she holds the Brené Brown Huffington Endowed Chair. She's written 5 global bestsellers. She's given a couple of TED Talks, one of them among the top 5 most viewed of all time. So, 50 million plus views. She's got a Netflix special out. And what she studies is courage, empathy, vulnerability, and shame. And I'll tell you what, as Erica said, I've spent 10 years organizing TEDx events. I spent almost 5 years involved with an organization called Singularity University based in Silicon Valley. And through that work, I've met a fair few people who have, written a book or given a TED Talk or both. And then you meet them and you kind of scratch the surface a little bit and you're like, oh, that's all there was. Okay, good to know. Thanks. Nice to meet you. And so when I went to do this training, I didn't go in necessarily like cynical or closed-minded, but I also didn't go in as an unmitigated fangirl. I went in, basically ready to hear what she had to say and interesting, curious to learn from her. And I will tell you, those 3 days were among the most robust that I've ever spent in my life, among the most powerful 3 days. Her research is incredibly robust. The methodology that she uses is robust. It generates profound insights that are absolutely applicable in a wide array of contexts. And I've since had the privilege of facilitating that material with over 700 people across Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Australia, in the US. And I learn something more every time that I do it. So I feel incredibly lucky to be able to do this work. So where I want to start today, because I think today, I forget the title of today's session, but something like courage to have our impact for organizations, awesomeness, something like that. And so courageous impact, thank you. That's much simpler than what I said. And so where I want to start today is actually with that first word and with what we mean when we're talking about courage. And our single most accurate measure of courage is our willingness to lean into vulnerability. And vulnerability is one of those words that we often have a lot of confusion around. There are a lot of myths about vulnerability. When we do our full kind of Dare to Lead program, we go over 6 myths of vulnerability. I'm just going to focus on the big kahuna vulnerability myth, which is the myth that vulnerability is weakness, which it is not. What we are talking about when we talk about vulnerability, the definition is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. Risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And so, right now, in terms of COVID-19, we're all operating in an environment of risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. But if you are trying to start an organization in any context, that is an act of vulnerability. If you are trying to start an organization that is having an impact on the world, that is an act of vulnerability. Making a public statement of your values is an act of vulnerability, risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. And so we keep coming back to this because in order for us to be effective at these things, to be effective at starting organizations, at leading organizations to create impact, at navigating disruption and uncertainty the way that we are, we have to be willing to be courageous. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is specifically the second thing I want to talk about specifically relates to disruption. And I'm trying to find a balance here between conversations about impact and organizational purpose. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change up my thing a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about what happened when what we did with BOMA New Zealand when the pandemic first started emerging. So BOMA New Zealand and BOMA Global, we're an organization, we run large scale events and we do training programs. We have executive training programs. We run these Dare to Lead programs. We have programs for directors. We have a scholarship program for secondary school educators, and we do large scale events. We did an event last year that was on the future of food and fiber in Aotearoa. We were planning an event for the end of this year that obviously is not happening. And so when the pandemic first started emerging, there was one side of the narrative that was, my job is to physically convene people. And that has literally just become illegal. So that's awkward. And, according to that narrative, like we were in really big trouble. Like, what do you do when your activity, your organizational activity is to bring people together in groups and you're in a situation where you can't bring people together in groups? But there was another side to the narrative. And that other side to the narrative was that actually our job is not to physically convene people. Our job is to help people navigate disruption and think differently about the world we have, about the world we want, and about who we want to be. And seen through that lens, our work is as relevant as it has ever been, if not more so. And it was a really, what has to transform, what has had to and will continue to have to transform is the way that we give effect to that work, right? So we used to give effect to it by physically convening people. Now we have to give effect to it in different ways. But it was this moment where, I'm sure all of us on this call have been in meetings ad nauseum where you're talking about purpose and vision and mission and you want to stick a fork in your eye because you're like, I know this is important and yet I can't see how it will actually translate to anything that we actually do on any given day. And this was a moment where I was like, wow, our return to purpose is what gives us the ability, number one, to pivot, and number two, to experiment with 10, 20, 50, 100 things, because we know that all of our experiments are bound together and given coherent direction by their ambition to give effect to the purpose of helping people navigate disruption and think differently about the world we have, the world we want, and who we want to be. So I saw a comment in here from someone, Meg, your job is to physically get volunteers out there doing things. And I guess the comment that I would have in this context, especially in the context of the 79 people who have gathered on this call because you care about impact, you care about what you can achieve. The number one thing we can do in this environment where everything is thrown up in the air is to come back to purpose. Why do we get volunteers physically out there doing things? Can we get them physically out there going for a walk in their local neighborhood, picking up rubbish with wearing gloves appropriately and disposing appropriately? Can we get people signing up to the Student Volunteer Army's training program so that they can safely go and shop for people who are homebound? What can we do? What is the purpose of that work, and how can we give effect to it in a way that is accessible to us in this current context? So the final thing that I wanted to touch on, the first one was about courage. Our most accurate measure of courage is our willingness to lean into vulnerability, and the definition of vulnerability is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. The second thing was about, returning to purpose. And in times of disruption, having a core purpose is a gift that not everybody has. And so, recognizing for all of us on this call that our focus on impact has actually given us a strength in terms of navigating this disruption that is not available to some people. And then the third thing I want to touch on is not something that we cover in the Dare to Lead program, but many years ago, 2012, we had a speaker at TEDx Christchurch, Ernesto Ciroli, whose talk has gone on to be seen, 5 million times. He's much beloved around the world. And Ernesto talks about, for any organization to succeed, we have to be able to do 3 things beautifully, or the organization has to be able to do 3 things beautifully: product, marketing, and financial management. You have to be able to make it, sell it, and look after the money. Now, in the context of this unconference, we're adding a 4th element to that, right? Because our definition of success is not only financial success, it is impact. So what we're saying is, for any organization to be successfully impactful, it has to be able to do 4 things beautifully: make it, sell it, look after the money, and have the impact that it's aiming to have, right? And the reason that I bring this up, the other thing Ernesto goes on to say, is that those 3 folks, the make it, sell it, look after the money, will never get along, because the product person, the marketing person's like, it has to be blue. And the product person's like, no, only green. That's the only color we can ever make it in. And the money person's going, I don't care what color it is. How much did you sell it for? And the marketing person's going, oh, I gave it away for free because I wanted to get in the door. And they kind of go round and round, and like everybody's kind of focused on their thing. And the art of entrepreneurship is the art of bringing those elements together in a way that makes a coherent whole. I would argue that impact carries that same function, right? That the impact person is going, I don't care what we sold or how much we sold it for. I just want to know what impact we had. And the finance person is going, but how can we make money? And the product person is going, but it has to be like this. And the marketing person is going, but we have to connect with our customers in this way. And the impact person is going, but what was the outcome? And they're kind of going round and round. And our job as people who care about impact organizations, to bring all 4 of those elements together in a coherent way. And the reason I bring this up is because when it comes to how courage relates to impact organizations, I've got an observation that holds true from 2 sides of a coin. One observation is that it takes courage in the context of a traditional organization to talk about impact. If you're in a traditional organization that is talking about quarterly returns and profit margins and revenue, market share, and revenue and return on equity and all those kinds of things, then to say, hang on a second, but are we doing anything good in the world? You have to be kind of brave to bring that up. But my complementary observation to that is that sometimes in the impact space, it takes equally as much courage for us to have the conversation about money, for us to have a conversation that it is okay for us to charge for what we do. It is okay for us to earn money at what we do. And that I would encourage all of us to have the courage to look at our organizations from all sides. That if we cannot find a way to do what we're doing in a way that is financially sustainable, we will not be able to deliver on our impact. And if we cannot find a way to deliver impact, then we won't be able to be financially sustainable. So I'm going to pause there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite us. I'm going to invite us to split out into breakout rooms. And I think even though I'm a co-host, I'm going to have to ask you to do that, Stephen, because I don't have that capability. Only the host has it.
Yep,
Let's
no
do
problem.
breakout rooms. Awesome. Let's do breakout rooms of 4 to 5, and I'm going to give you 8 minutes in your breakout room, 7 minutes in your breakout room. So we'll come back at 2:54, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. We can have a kind of general discussion. So over to you for your breakout rooms. in the breakout room. The purpose of the breakout room is to have a chat about basically the 3 topics that I've just raised, our definition of courage, our coming back to purpose, and our willingness to lean into not only having impact, but also being financially sustainable. So a general discussion on that topic. Any questions, comments, observations, or objections, and you can bring those back to the general group. I think we got about 5 seconds before everybody else gets checked back in. Welcome, Haidemai, welcome back. Good to see everybody. Okay, and really happy to hear from you either through hand raising and we can call on you, or you can check questions or comments in the chat. But we just have about 5 minutes to discuss what we've been talking about. So yeah, over to you.
If nobody goes, I really just want to ask this question that came from our conversation, and Kaila, you can take it up, or others, but if financial sustainability is the bugbear or the elephant in the room about impact, which you said at the beginning before you set to sit, and my talking partner Gemini spent a lot of time talking about that, what do you think is the underpinning thing that makes impact creators not ask or sustain themselves or build that into their thinking? What is the thing that's limiting that? I'm really curious what you would respond to that question.
Yeah. So basically, I think money, like food, for almost all of us, represents so much more than the thing itself, right? We've gotten messages from when we were born about whether money is represents success, power, greed, whether we are worthy of it, whether we are not worthy of it, whether we're worthy if we don't have it. And so for all of us, you know, whether capitalism is good, whether capitalism is terrible, like we will all carry a truckload of stories and noise about money with us into every one of those conversations. And so when for my observation is that many people who end up in the impact space carry stories about money that are aligned to, you know, it's not, money is, wanting money is greedy, or wanting to earn, or nobody can afford to pay this and therefore we can't charge for it. And so I think the main reason it's such a bugbear is because of those stories that we carry with us. Megan, I see you've got your hand up. Megan, I've unmuted you.
Hi. Yeah, well, it's sort of along that line. I was saying how that as an individual, because you've talked about social enterprise, but as individuals trying to make an impact in a space, often artists and others aren't recognised financially. And yeah, whether you've got any comment about individual freelancers, or how do you move into that impact space as an individual?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was referencing specifically social enterprise organizations. You're so right. And this might sound completely counter to what I said earlier, but one of the things I find frustrating is that there are so many people in this world who are extraordinary artists, performers, creative contributors, and instead of simply being able to celebrate them for that and let them be awesome at that, we also impose upon them as individuals that they have to make money as well, or they have to be able to cultivate a crowd, or, you know, grow their social media presence, or have a Patreon or whatever, instead of just being able to be an amazing cellist or comedian or writer or whatever it may be. You know, I think that one of our huge challenges we face as a global society is the volume of work that we don't recognize as work. Last year we had the wonderful, what's her name, Erica? She's so gorgeous. She's on TED now. Dame, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's an economist. She was in Parliament. I'm really a total fan of hers, and I'm completely blanking on her name. Anyway, she was talking about the boundary of production and how we call all work that is on this side of the boundary of production is worth money, and everything on that side of the boundary of production is not. And therefore, if you're in labor with your kid, you're being unproductive. Marilyn Waring, thank you very much. Ha! That was so frustrating. That's like forgetting the name of my of my kid. Anyway, so often, so much of our work in the world is not valued, and it's why I'm a huge advocate of things like a guaranteed minimum income or universal basic income, because we are all worthy of dignity. And the conversation about being courageous about money doesn't mean that I don't think that every single one of us is worthy of dignity and food and shelter and housing and housing and a fulfilling life. With that, I think I'm just about out of time. Thank you so much for your sharing this half an hour with me. It was really a privilege. I so appreciate it.
Let's give a round of applause. Awesome.